to the Multi-State Advanced Manufacturing Consortium-sponsored Using Labor Market Intelligence to Strengthen Advanced Manufacturing Education webinar series. This webinar series seeks to build the capacity of college faculty and staff to use labor market intelligence to support education and training that is more responsive to industry skills, demand, and job seeker needs. Participants will be exposed to data tools and analytical approaches that will enhance their ability to deliver data-informed support to a diverse network of customers, including students, employers, college administrators, and funding providers. Today's webinar is titled Using Data to Help Students Strategically Select Courses and Launch Successful Careers. The target audience of this webinar includes student advisors and career counselors. Before we start our presentation, let me first go through a few logistical items. All webinar participants are in listen-only mode, but there will be time at the end of the webinar for a question and answer session. If you have any questions for our instructor, please feel free to type them in the questions box, which you'll see in the GoToWebinar interface. You can submit questions at any point during the webinar, but we'll hold them until the end of the presentation. I will go through the questions and read them out loud to our instructor. Again, feel free to submit questions at any point during the presentation. Now, please welcome our instructor, Mark White, PhD. Mark serves as Vice President for Research at CREC. Since joining CREC in 2004, he has directed an array of regional economic and workforce development research and technical assistance projects across the United States and Canada. He is particularly active in projects related to manufacturing. Mark also develops and delivers training courses about data-driven strategic planning for a range of clients, including economic and community researchers, labor market information analysts, and workforce development professionals. Mark holds a PhD in International Studies from the University of Miami and a Master's in Geography from Syracuse University. Mark, I will now turn it over to you.
Great, thanks, Greg. Thank you all for joining us this afternoon. What we're about to start is the first of a series of webinars geared toward different types of college faculty and staff. And today we want to introduce some publicly available tools that can help college staff help students with some of their career exploration and finding jobs. Before we dive too far into our material, I just want to give just a little bit of background about us and our role within the Multi-State Advanced Manufacturing Consortium project. We work for an organization called the Center for Regional Economic Competitiveness that's based here in Arlington, Virginia, and we are very much within the data world, in that we do a lot of research and analysis to help drive decision-making in communities and states around the country, often in the sphere of economic development, workforce development, and higher education. We also, because we are data geeks at heart, are involved in the management of several professional associations, national professional associations, that are all related to data in some form or fashion, one of which is the Labor Market Information Institute, which is an organization that supports the state labor market information agency, so that you may have in your state where you may get a lot of your labor market information already. So our project with the Multi-State Advanced Manufacturing Consortium is to help college faculty and staff meet their information or meet the information needs of their customers. So our goal is not to help their customers, but rather to help college faculty and staff. And we went and talked to a number of colleges throughout the consortium about their different information needs, and clearly they have, depending on where they're sitting in their college, they have different needs, which I'll get into in just a second here. And so our goal over the course of our project is to make sure that college staff and faculty have both the data tools and resources and the analytical capacity they need to answer some key questions so that they can do their jobs better. In this instance, we after talking to a number of the colleges, we basically identified 6 main roles within the college faculty and staff. There's student advisors and placement counselors, to which we're talking with today, or the focus of what we're doing today. There's corporate training coordinators, there's curriculum planners, institutional researchers, and college grant writers. They all have, obviously instructors are in here as well, but they all have different data needs in some form or fashion. In some schools, these are distinct roles, and in others, you know, a lot of people are wearing a lot of different hats, and these aren't mutually exclusive categories. But we just want to recognize the fact that a lot of, depending on where you're sitting in the college, you have different information needs. So we want to make sure that you have, over the course of our project, access to some of the information that can help you answer some of your key questions. As I said, in this case, with student advisors and placement counselors, you want to make sure that students are making informed choices about what kind of educational and career paths they should take. And certainly when they get to the end of their education, you want to make sure that they're able to find jobs in their careers. And they know what they're going into with eyes wide open. So the purpose of this webinar is to, we want to introduce you to several public data tools and resources that can help you. You know, one of the challenges with a lot of resources that are out there is that they offer a lot, but they also have shortcomings, so we can talk a little bit about that. And then we want to run through essentially what will be several scenarios that are common questions that probably come up for counselors in terms of relating to how students identify career opportunities, how students you know, learn about what is actually involved with each of their different jobs, each of these different occupations or jobs, help them set expectations about what they can potentially earn when they're done, so finding that wage information. And then also, you know, knowing where there are some industries that are likely to hire students once they're done. So the agenda for this is, I want to talk, before we dive too far into some of the data tools, talk about the structure of job-related data. You know, I would assume some of you may be familiar with this, but a lot of you may not be, in terms of how do you find information about different jobs. You know, the tools for answering some of those key student questions in terms of what should I do, what does this work entail, how much should I expect to earn, and what industries hire those occupations. That's kind of the bulk of where we want to spend a lot of our time, but then we also want to take the opportunity when we have you here on the phone to, we'll show you a few screenshots and give you a little bit of a, we'll show you a little bit of some of the data tools that we're working on for the M-SAMC colleges in terms of helping better meet some of their data needs, so you can get a flavor for some other products that we will have done hopefully by the end of the summer that will be available to you all in the consortium. And then at the end we'll have a little Q&A as well. So if you have questions, feel free to type them into the question box, and at the end of the webinar we'll dive in and answer some questions. So an important thing to keep in mind is that oftentimes when we're thinking about jobs and information, you know, about you know, work, is that we think in terms of job titles, and job titles can vary widely within an industry, between industries, and really it may mean that a worker is doing similar tasks, even though it's called one thing in one industry and another thing in another industry. With our data, we want to make sure that we have something that's standardized, so that when we're comparing things across the country or across industries, that we're comparing likes. And so that's why we have our data are organized in terms of occupations. So occupations describe a set of tasks that are standard across industries. And so as we want to gain information about different occupations, or look at the data for different occupations, whether it's wages or growth or how many people simply work in that occupation, you know, we need to convert from job titles to occupations. And there's a tool that allows us to do that, and I'm going to cut to that here for a quick demonstration, and that is the ONA SOC, and we'll explain what SOC codes are here in a little bit, autocoder. And so really it's a simple tool that if we type in CNC operator, for instance, that's not necessarily an occupational title, so there may not be data attached to that. So we need to know for that job title what occupations are associated with that job title. And so I just hit search, and it comes up with a handful of occupations that match up to that job title. In terms of the level of fit. So computer-controlled machine tool operators, essentially it's metal and plastic computer-controlled machine tool operators. And so that's, if you're looking for an occupation that is for CNC operator, it'll be the SOC code 51/4011, and I'll explain what that means here in a second. But that's the one thing you want to write down. In other cases, job titles aren't necessarily as obvious as that. So if I was looking for a brewer because I enjoy brewing beer and I would like to do that for a career, that's actually a true statement, then I would hit type in brewer and hit search. And so there is no standard occupational classification code for brewer, but there is for food batch makers. So that's likely where I would look for information on that. So now that we've converted our job titles to occupations, I mentioned the code that was there. What does that all mean? And we organize occupations by what's called the Standard Occupational Classification System, or SOC. Like I said, it's a hierarchical system that allows us to organize different occupations into different categories. And these categories are based on job duty skills and the education and training required. And it's a hierarchy. So the broad groups, or major groups they're called, there's 23 SOC codes within the major group. And as we drill down into a more detailed level of what those occupations are, the detailed occupations, there's now 840. And so we'll show you a little bit about what that means, is that we look at the major groups. Here are those 23 major groups, and they range from, for instance, manufacturing occupations to legal occupations, healthcare support occupations, sales and related occupations, etc. The ones that are most relevant to manufacturing are architecture and engineering occupations. So anything that starts with 17 is something that would be for architecture and engineering. Anything that starts with 51 would be a production occupation. And then I would also add probably a third, the 49, anything that's just 49 for installation, maintenance, and repair. And that will, there'll be some manufacturing-related occupations in there, just as well as there will be, for instance, people who will, auto mechanics, for instance, would also fall in there. But 17 and 51 are the two major groups that are most directly relevant to manufacturing. So if you're looking through occupations, those are the ones, if they start with those two numbers, that's what you're looking for. As an example, we'll go to 51. So the way you read the SOC codes, 51/0000 is all production occupations. If we go down to the next level of detail, 51/4000, that includes all metal workers and plastic workers. 51/4010 would be the broad occupation of computer-controlled programmers and operators. And then finally, we drill down a bit more, and then we get that detailed, that one out of 840 occupations. That is 51/4011, which is computer-controlled machine tool operators for metal and plastic. And so that's, once we know how the SOC system works, then it's a lot easier to actually go in, dive in, and find the occupations we're looking for. Now, one of the the challenges with working with this, there's some good things and some bad things related to working with our data structured in this way. One, it provides an organizing framework. Again, it allows us to compare likes. We can, see groups of similar occupations that do that also do, that do similar tasks, are involved in a similar set of activities, and there is the consistency that's there. That said, there are also some limitations, and we have those listed here on the right-hand side of the slide, in that sometimes the occupational titles, are a little bit obsolete. So it's a little slow in terms of keeping up with the changing nature of work. So if you think, you go back, I'll say now 30 years ago, you would never find a job called web developer because people wouldn't, you wouldn't know what that is. So it takes a while for a job to become prominent, for them to then update the SOC codes themselves so that they reflect the current nature of work. So they're a little bit inflexible. They're sometimes obsolete. They're it takes a little while to catch up with what you're looking for. In some cases, they're too general. For instance, the example of brewers, food batch makers, is a bit too general. In others, they may be a bit too specific. So one of the newer ones is wind turbine technician. So it's a very specific to an industry or a set of activities. So they vary. But that said, the value of the SOC codes is it really allows us to compare similar groups of activities to each other. So it's kind of the classification system that we operate with, and the data are structured. So you need to understand that to be able to access the information. So we now want to dive into some of the guts of the webinar, and that's kind of the resources for answering some key student questions. And as I said, we thought about what are the most common or several common scenarios that might come up or questions that might come up, and at the most basic level is what should I do? Sometimes students come in and they have no idea what course of study that they should pursue, and they need some guidance. They want to find some kind of career path or educational path that aligns with their interests. Once they've identified that, the career exploration part kicks in, and what does this work actually entail? If I go down this path, what am I going to end up doing for a career? All important, particularly on both at the front end and the back end of the educational experience, is what should I expect to earn? So, the expectation management side of things is very important, as is what kind of industries are likely to have jobs in my field. And one of the things that I had, another common question is, what companies are hiring? And that's something we'll touch on a little bit later, but that's going to be a bigger subject of a later webinar. So one of the big resources for answering many of these questions is ONET. And so if you're not familiar with ONET, well, we're gonna spend some time familiarizing you with the ONET database here in the next 10 or 15 minutes. It's a really hugely important resource. So ONET is the Occupational Information Network, and is a centralized database for information about what workers do and how they do it. It is funded by the Department of Labor's Employment and Training Administration, so it's federally funded, so its maintenance is funded, and they're continually surveying workers from each occupation to make sure that information is there. Generally speaking, they survey about people for about 100 different occupations every year. So if you have 840 occupations, you're probably, the database is completely turned over or refreshed every 7 or 8 years. Some occupations are not updated as much as others. Some higher in demand or fast changing occupations may be updated more regularly. And it contains, the database itself contains an interactive application for searching for occupations. So this is what ONET looks like. if you go to the front page, and we're going to go there here in a minute, and when you get there, you'll see that there's a lot of different ways to search for information on occupation. So you can find occupations by searching by keywords or that SOC code, if you know that SOC code. You can look for occupations, whether it's by career cluster or the industry that they're in, or if it's in a STEM discipline, for instance. You can do a more advanced search and look. I'm looking for a job that requires a certain type of skill, so you can search that way. Before we dive into what some of the information about these different occupations that are there, I want to highlight two things, and we're going to first talk a little bit about My Next Move, which is a tool that they've developed basically that help students list their skills and their interests, and then what jobs align with their interests. So I'm going to show that here in a little bit. And then the other below it is something called My Next Move for veterans, and there, basically, if a veteran comes to your school and they liked what they were doing when they were in the military, then they will be able to, this will help direct them to similar types of occupations that use those similar skills within the civilian workforce. So for instance, my brother-in-law is a maintenance mechanic in the Coast Guard, and so he could use this to see what could I be doing in terms of maintenance within the private sector. So with that, I'm going to cut out to, actually, you know what? So for My Next Move, like I said, this is a web-based tool for students and job seekers, and there are ways to search for different things. And so when you go to My Next Move, so you click on that box that was on the front of ONET, you'll see a lot of different ways to search, and some of these are some of the similar searches that were there on the front page. I want to be a, and then you can list a certain career, or I'll know it when I see it, and you can look through industries just broadly speaking. The one that we want to highlight on is this tool off to the right that says, I'm not really sure. So if you have students that come in and they don't know what they want to do, then this helps profile their interests. So if you click on that, and I did this for myself, you'll see you'll basically go to this interest profiler, and they'll ask you 60 different questions. And so I went through and did this for myself, whether you strongly dislike or all the way to strongly like, a Likert scale of interests, for a bunch of different kind of seemingly oddball type activities, but they're all tied to something bigger than that. And then once you answer all these 60 questions, it'll give you some of the results. And this is what it looks like. And as I said, this is what it was for me. So you can see I am investigative, apparently artistic, and conventional. I am not social, apparently. So in any case, it gives you, here's the set of interests, and then once you have kind of a score for your set of interests, it'll take you to what's called different job zones, and that gives people an idea of how much education or training are they going to need to require for these different occupations. In some cases, if you wanted to be a doctor, you need to obviously have extensive preparation required. That involves extensive training. Sometimes people, well, in many cases, people don't have the time to do that kind of, put in that kind of education. They need something quicker. So you can look at jobs or occupations that require, less preparation to be able to be qualified for those jobs, prepared for those jobs. And then finally, if you click on your job zone, in this case, I chose job zone 3, which is medium job preparation. It listed a number of different occupations that fit my interests and preparation level. And so that anywhere from CNC operators to desktop publishers, web developers, and then it gives you an idea of whether these are, for instance, a bright outlook. That's what the sunshine is. So this is a growing occupation. And off to the right-hand side, you can see the career has apprenticeship programs, so it'll connect you to where you can look up apprenticeship programs within your state. So really, what my next move is that for I shouldn't say kids, for students, just generally speaking, who come in and don't really have an idea of what they're interested in doing, this gives it's a quick tool. It takes about 10 minutes and helps start narrowing down what are some of the occupations they should be looking for. So they're not starting with just a blank slate. So once we have some occupations that we're interested in, we can then turn to our next question, and that is, what does this occupation entail? And to do that, we'll go to the ONET database, which is ONET Online here, and I'm going to type in, as we saw, one of our examples, computer numerically controlled, into the keyword for an occupation search. And you see CNC machine tool programmers, metal and plastic. We're going to go with computer-controlled machine tool operators, which we had talked about before. So the SOC code is 514011. And this brings you to the summary page that's here. So there's a whole lot of information that's here. A brief one-sentence explanation of what this occupation entails. Going back to the idea of job titles, here are a number of the different job titles that might fit within this occupation. So CNC lathe operator, CNC machinist, CNC setup and operator. So there's a number of different occupations that are there. As you scroll down, you can see that here are some of the common tasks that are involved with this job. They list 5 out of 27, and if you just click the plus, you get the full list. Minus, we'll close it. In terms of tools and technology, it lists some tools, it lists technology. Now, one of the neat things that ONET has added, this is a recent addition, is that if you, here's computer-aided design software is one of the technologies that's used for this particular occupation. If you click on the plus, it'll bring up related occupations. So you get to see maybe this isn't necessarily the occupation for me. I want to use this technology. Where are other opportunities? So aerospace engineers or other types of engineers or scientists may use, CAD software, for instance, or for the tool side for milling machines, engineers. And there's 42 related occupations that are there. These are some of the top ones that come up, but there's still 42 others, so it's not just these 5. So there's a lot of information that's kind of hidden behind what's there. Now, one of the other things that ONET has are these knowledge, skills, and abilities, these KSAs that are there. And one of I think the frustrations is a little bit of a limitation of what's in ONET, again, because we're trying to, have a database that compares all occupations to all other occupations. So we have a kind of knowledge, skills, and abilities that are, potentially used in hundreds of different occupations. I think people who are looking at these KSAs as a way to help design curriculum may get frustrated in looking at these because they find them too generic. But if you put yourself, in the seat of a student trying to do some career exploration, it really can give them some kind of indication about what these different occupations entail. So, it's a database that has multiple user groups, and in some cases it probably meets the needs of some user groups better than others. So, I just know that's been, for people looking to do curriculum planning off of this information, it can be a challenge. But we'll get to that issue here in a little bit. Other things that can be found here is the detailed work activities, some of the work context, information about the job zones. There's a couple other things I wanted to highlight here too. In terms of the education, one of the things that we often see is the minimum education required for this occupation is this. But really, in any occupation, people are going to have a wide array of different job, of educational backgrounds. And so ONET, in their updating process, has essentially it's a survey, and it gives the educational requirements for the different jobs. And we can see for a CNC machine operator that 39% have a high school diploma or equivalent, about 20% have post-secondary certificate, 15% some college or no degree. So it really varies, but it gives you an idea of what the range of educational requirements are for another job, for this job. A couple other things that are worth highlighting here is certifications for different. I know that's a big issue for a lot of people, particularly in finding jobs. It's finding certifications. So if you click on that for CNC or computer-controlled machine tool operators, you can see that there's several different certifications that are there, and it gives you an idea of the type, whether it's core or advanced, some of the certifying organizations that have these certifications. So you can see NIMS, for instance, come up with machining level 1, CNC machine milling, program setup and operations. And then the letters off to the side also give some indication. This is, third-party industry endorsed, certificate is related to some kind of CTE career cluster, and then the M is for military. As a certification is related to some military occupational specialty. So again, for the folks working with veterans, there's some information there that ties it to that world as well. So as I said, there's a whole host of information that's here. Here are related occupations. Again, it's good to know related occupations. This may be something for if you're counseling an incumbent worker or a displaced worker who's lost their job. It's an idea of, well, what were you doing before, and what are some occupations that require similar sets of skills? We once did some work in Western North Carolina, which was the heart of the furniture industry, and so as the furniture industry kind of imploded about 10 or 15 years ago in Western North Carolina, there were a lot of people with woodworking skills that were out of work, and so they were looking for transferable skills. And one of the places where they found additional work was in the boat building business, which required people with similar sets of skills. So they had those similar occupations hired by a totally different industry. So that's why it's good to have that kind of related information. The other information that's here, and we're going to dive in a little bit more detail here in a second, is that there's information not only on projected growth, is it growing faster than average? Are there how many job openings nationwide in the future? And they have state wages and state trends. And realizing that state wages and state trends are good, and you probably want something more local, we're going to speak to that here in a second. So just finishing up on ONET overall, there's a wealth of information that's here for a variety of audiences. For students and workers, it's a real tool for career exploration. And for faculty looking to can help with more specifics in terms of what's involved with these different jobs. But it really is a kind of a good initial point for career exploration, and it's a good tool for that for the students you're working with. So directing them to ONET would probably be quite helpful for a lot of students, particularly if they don't have a detailed or a firm grasp of what they want to do with their lives. So the next question is, as we mentioned, wages being an important question, because that's always, as students come in, well, how much am I going to earn, or how much should I expect to earn? And for this information, this is where we'll turn to a different source, and we're going to turn to the U.S. Bureau of Labor Statistics and the Occupational Employment Statistics. and this provides detailed wage data for folks. And so I'm going to slide back here and go to the BLS website. And if you haven't used the BLS website, to a certain extent, it can be somewhat intimidating because there's a lot of information here, and finding that information can be a challenge. So I want to lead you through finding at least the wage information here. And so when we go to bls.gov, and the U.S. Bureau of Labor Statistics is part of the Department of Labor, this is their homepage. And if you're looking for wages, you'd slide over to subjects, and you want to know wages in your area. You could slide down to wages by area and occupation under pay and benefits. So I'm clicking on that. And then there's a bunch of different information that's here. National wage data. They have wage data by regions, which are really broad parts of the country. State wage data. And then the one that we care about, because we want those detailed occupational wages, we'll go down to 375 metropolitan statistical areas. So this link right here. Now, an important thing to keep in mind with occupational employment statistics is that it's based on a survey. So it's actually a rolling survey, so it's an average of 6, I think, half years, basically, so 6 over the course of 3 years. So it's a bit of a rolling survey, so you can't really use it as a time series, but it does give you an idea. It captures, you know, what the kind of the going wages are in a given place. So we'll click on this. For this example, we want to look at the different metro areas. So again, it's one of the challenges for non-metro areas. Because it's a survey, you need to have a big enough survey sample to have confidence in what's there. In this case, we're going to look up an example of, at the top here, we're going to look up Tennessee. So we're going to look up in Middle Tennessee, the Nashville, Davidson, Murfreesboro area, where we have, I think, some folks from Murfreesboro on the call. We're going to click on that to look up wages for different occupations, and we'll come to this particular page. And what you see is it's an annual survey, so the OES is it's an annual number, but it's based on a rolling survey. But it comes out once a year in May, and it's broken down by different occupations. And so here are, again, going back to our SOC codes, here are 23 major groups. All occupations is all occupations. And say I want to look up, and you can go down to the table, for instance, and there's all the occupations that are there. But that's a lot of information. I want to focus just in on that CNC machine operator. And so I'm going to type in 514011, and that gives me the computer-controlled machine tool operators within Middle Tennessee. And when I look at it, I can see that in terms of employment, there's 590 people within this occupation within kind of the greater Nashville area. We can look at the median hourly wage, which is $19.78, so almost $20 an hour. The mean hourly wage, which is about $19 an hour, $18.75, so a little less than that in terms of the mean. That's there. And so that gives me an idea of, if I'm telling a student how much, well, if you go into this particular occupation, this is how much you can expect to make. There are large downloadable Excel files, so if you want information of the 10th, the 25th, 75th, 90th percentile to get a wider range of wages within a place, you can download the Excel file here, and that'll have basically all the OES data for every metro area. And then you'll have to use the sort and filter functions to get it for your area. You know, one of the good things about the kind of the 10th and the 90th percentile is that it gives you an idea of the range of what's there. Sometimes people will use it to say this is the 10th is an entry-level wage, the 90th is an experienced wage. The folks at BLS will tell you, well, that's not necessarily true because, you know, the wage for the 10th could just be a low-paying employer, for instance. So, but you know, as a proxy, it generally works that way. By way of illustrating, here in Nashville, I looked up the average wage for the 10th and 90th percentile for this occupation, and the 10th percentile was $11 an hour, and the 90th was $27 an hour. So that gives you an idea of where the range is. So this is a good place to go in terms of looking for occupational wages. So if you're not familiar with how to get here, this would be a really good trick to know how to get there, because the wage question is a really important question for many students. So another thing, the fourth question that we have here is that if I enter this occupation, what industries will I likely find work in? And so here we're looking at the National Staffing Pattern Matrix, which provides some indication about industries that are likely to either employ workers in a given occupation or the occupational composition of a given industry. So what do I mean by that? And so this is a national, there's a staffing pattern within every industry. It's collected at a national level. So when you look at these, you have to kind of assume that that your industry, your local industry, mirrors, at least make the initial assumption that your industry mirrors the national industry. So in this case, I selected the one occupation. I typed in computer-controlled machine tool operators here, and I'll hit submit. And so what this will tell me is that nationally, if I go into being a computer-controlled machine tool operator, that 17% in 2012, 17% of all people in this occupation worked in machine shops. 10% of all people who worked in this occupation were in motor vehicle parts manufacturing, and so on. So you get a sense of the kind of industries that are likely to hire people in these occupations. Now the flip side of this is, for a given industry, what kind of occupations do they hire? So this is kind of the opposite of that, is that I selected one industry, in this case motor vehicle parts manufacturing, and then I hit submit, and I can see that the most common occupation within motor vehicle parts manufacturing are team assemblers, so basically assembly folks. And then there's a big drop-off to a bunch of other occupations in terms of machinists. So 4% of people who work within the motor vehicle parts manufacturing industry are machinists. 3% are computer-controlled machine tool operators. So it gives you a sense of those occupations in terms of where they fit within broader industries. So one of the things that I will say about this is that, and going back here, these are the national projections in terms of the projected employment. So we can see, within motor vehicle parts manufacturing, it's expected to grow in terms of employment, and you can see the change from an occupation in 2012 to 2020. So team assemblers are likely to become a greater percentage of the industry. Machinists are a slightly greater. People involved in, well, here we're looking at inspectors is likely to stay the same. First line supervisors is about to stay the same. So you can see how they're going to change over a 10-year period. Now this is at the national level. So if you want to think about long-term projections at a more state and local level, well, that'll actually be the subject of our webinar next month. The other thing I'll add is that a lot of people are aware of or interested in data that comes from online job advertisements, where There are companies that go out and scrape the web looking for different job advertisements and then aggregate that information. And that's more of a short-term, where are the jobs located type question. And so that's, again, something that will be covered in our webinar next month. So with that, I'm going to just want to say a few things to remember about these data. Just a few takeaways is that publicly available data offer an important starting point, and so whether it's ONET or information from the Bureau of Labor Statistics, these are good places to start in terms of helping students with some of their career exploration. I say it's an important place to start because your local employers will often be a superior source of wage data or skill demands. They're going to know, and so having, complementing the publicly available data with conversations with your local industry partners is obviously a very important piece of the puzzle in terms of getting that full information picture of what's there. A lot of you may have access to proprietary data sources that give you a lot of detail that you may not be able to get from publicly available data sources, but unless they're doing some kind of survey, it's important to keep in mind that that those data vendors are using some of the data that we showed here as a foundation for some of their estimates. As I said, the SOC codes, again, thinking about in terms of finding, the occupations are always, they're a little bit behind the time. So web developer, wind turbine service technician, these were all new in 2010. It's not that these jobs didn't exist prior to that. It's just that our classification system caught up to them. And the next update of the SOC codes will be in 2018. And similarly, again, with ONET in terms of their occupational descriptions, local employers will provide better descriptions. So I have here as a slide, just these are the key sources for what we covered in terms of converting job titles to occupations. It's the autocoder, and then some of the other resources that are here. So these are here as a resource. The PowerPoint and all these resources will be available after the webinar. Before we get to our Q&A session, I just want to quickly take a few minutes to talk about some of the efforts that we are also working on to help you. And so we're developing a handful of tools as well that will hopefully fill in some of the the holes that may be here. And so one of them is what we're calling the M-SAMC data dashboard, and that's really there's some key pieces of information that you need to find, and sometimes it can be very difficult to actually find that information, particularly when you're only going there once every 6 months, for instance. You forget how to do it, and so we're creating a dashboard that can help you answer some common questions, and the data are specific to just the schools within the Multi-State Advanced Manufacturing Consortium. So it's a benefit for the participating colleges. And so here we have some demographic industry information, some workforce information. And these data, because a lot of times we're comparing them to the state and the nation, it'll help you kind of quickly answer some of those compared to what. We know this occupation is growing in our area, but if it's growing at 1% annually, what does that mean? Is that fast? Is that slow? How does that compare to the state or to the nation? And then we'll also have some easy links to some of the key data resources. So this is what the front page will look something along these lines. This is one of the products we hope to have we'll have done by the end of the summer. In this instance, we have Gadsden State Community College data for them, and you can see that we have some basic demographic information that may or may not be used in like a grant application, for instance. We have information on manufacturing employment and projections, and then there's a couple other things that are kind of down here to the bottom, production occupations, and we have where it says show detail. We have it broken out, so here's some more information on production occupations in terms of what are the big ones in the Gadsden State service area in terms of their employment 2010, 2015, with the projected future. and their compound annual growth rate during those periods. We're still working on labeling some things, so we'll make sure things are cleaned up by the time that it's or finalized by the time it's that's done. Another big thing that'll be, I think, very useful to you all, speaking in terms of job postings, is that you'll be able to type in an SOC code, an occupation code for that you're interested in, and we'll basically be able to show you how many job openings are currently available within a 60-mile radius of your college. And so in this instance, or just job openings, production occupations, pardon me, within 60-mile radius of your college. So here in Gadsden, there's 26 openings for first-line supervisors, 18 for packaging and filling machine operators. For welders, we highlighted that, and then you can see here where there's eight jobs available within 60 miles of Gadsden. Some of those stretch over into Georgia, and then you can link to the actual job advert. So that'll be part of the tool as well. So that's hopefully something that'll be helpful to you all. The other thing that we're working on, and know it's been a big effort of the M-SAMC group, is in terms of pulling together performance-based objectives. So within ONET, one of the things I touched upon is some of the skills that are listed there seem kind of generic and aren't as directly relevant to pulling together training curriculum or that kind of information as you'd like them to be. So one of the things that the consortium has been working on is pulling together performance-based objectives for a number of different topics and issue areas. And so we're working on a database that will have those very detailed, laid out skills in a database form for people to access. So this database will have some key PBO check sheets. We'll have the opportunity to systematically collect information about those skill needs, so we'll be able to aggregate those and see what ones are in demand and what aren't. And then by comparing the needs of industry and comparing what's being taught in the colleges, this database will help align course materials to industry needs. So this off to the side is kind of what it looks like, and you can see we have a number of different topic areas, from hydraulics to using FANUC to control logics, for instance. There are a number of them that are here, about 24 currently. And then when you click on a given one, it'll list out those very specific performance-based objectives that students will need to demonstrate proficiency in. So again, this is another tool that will be coming this summer that we're working to finish a beta version that we can get in people's hands. Two other resources that we're also working on is a career pathways tool, which will basically try to connect PBO information to the labor market information that we discussed here today, and hopefully this will help articulate pathways for students to then follow in terms of these are the skills that I need to demonstrate competency or proficiency in, and this will lead me to this kind of career or this kind of occupation, and that occupation can lead me on this type of career. And so hopefully that'll be a good tool for counselors going forward. That's something that we're a little bit behind. Where it's coming after the database, the dashboard, and the PBO tool on. And then another thing that we're working on is we're going to have a series of maybe around 25 or so instructional videos. They'll be about 22 minutes long is what we're shooting for each. And that'll help show college staff how to find key pieces of information. So for instance, as we went through finding the wage information from the Bureau of Labor Statistics website, that will be a short video. So I equate it to basically like, I'm not terribly handy, so I turn to YouTube to help me figure out how to, for instance, regrout my bathroom floor, because it's not something that I know how to do, and I can quickly watch a 5-minute video and I have a better understanding of how to do that. Well, this would be the equivalent of doing that for this kind of labor market information. And finally, we're also doing a bunch more training. We're doing some in-person training sessions, initially for corporate college representatives, starting next week, actually, in Gaston, Alabama. And then later in the summer, we have some confirmed training, in-person training that will be available at Bridge Valley and in Spartanburg. And then our webinar series will continue next month in terms of using data to help develop existing curriculum, basically by looking for demand for different occupations and jobs. So that'll speak to a certain extent, that'll speak to some of the real-time labor market information in terms of the job adverts, in terms of a short-term thing, and then longer-term projections. The other one I want to just highlight is we mentioned these different tools, is that when these tools are ready for a wider release, we'll have a webinar that demonstrates those tools and walks people through some of those tools that I showed the screenshots of before. So with that, I'll stop now. And if you have some questions, make sure to type them in the question box. We'll answer them if they come in. The other thing, so if you're in the in the question box, if you have questions, fire away. If not, you think about something later, I would say that my email address is here on the page, and you are free anytime to shoot me off an email, and I'll try to answer as best as we can, quickly as we can too.
Thank you, Mark. We will now begin the question and answer portion of the webinar. We've received a few questions regarding the availability of the presentation after the webinar. The full webinar and presentation will be made available within 48 hours after the webinar. As soon as they are available, we will be sending out a follow-up email to all attendees with links where they can be downloaded.
So yeah, this information will be on the, ultimately will end up on the M-SAMC.org website. And so we'll make sure that the recording and the PowerPoint is there. So if if there's things here that you want to revisit, or if there's someone who wasn't able to attend at your schools, and that information will be there. And if there aren't any other questions, then thank you all for taking the time to listen today. Like I said, my email address is located at the bottom, and feel free to ask questions anytime. So, thank you.
I would like to thank Mark for his presentation and all of our participants. The full webinar and presentation will be made available within 48 hours after the webinar. We'll be sending out a follow-up email to all attendees with links to where you'll be able to download these materials. The next session of this webinar series will be on using data to develop new and adapt existing curriculum. The target audience of the webinar includes curriculum planners. The webinar is scheduled for Tuesday, July 21st from 2 to 3 p.m. Eastern Daylight Time. A formal announcement will be made in the coming weeks. Thank you again for joining us. This concludes today's webinar.
Thank you.